Hello and welcome back to module number 4. I'm going to start module number 4 before we will go to the content of the module. I'm going to tell you about two assignments that I posted today. One is the paper proposal, which is an outline in this page. It is not. It is the first major paper, and it should consist of 3 to 4 pages as maximum. And you should follow the APA style. And I attach a document showing you how to do that. The deadline is next week, July 21. So it's not about your career here, it's not about what you are planning to become, but it's all about what is your interest. Interest is what are you going to do next, in what field. And so it should be about the area of interest such as information science or data science or healthcare. Some of you are from healthcare, and it should be about, example, the history of information science, if that is your area of interest, or information technology, or what contribution people made to those fields, or information retrieval, which we will cover this in today's lecture. And so all those subjects, you should provide some background, what is interest, what is going on. Again, in the beginning of the class, I recommend you to read Wired. Wired is a magazine that specializes in IT and visualization. If you have a Facebook present, you could hook up to like the Wire magazine, and it will give you a short summary of articles that they cover, and see if that is of interest to you or not. So that was the idea of the assignment. The quiz will be the coming quiz that I assigned this week too, is about the reading assignment in module number 3. Please go over that. Do not make up answers, just go over that, read it good, make notes, and that will help you with a quiz. Now to the actual module, and it's going to cover 2 subjects: information technology and information retrieval. And I will start my discussion. I'm going to start about IT concept with regard to computer. And every computer, even your cell phone, has a hardware, it has information storage, it has a display, it has file system, it has a network that allowed you to connect to to any network, but it also have a programming side and what with Intel and how to apply that, and it has languages that allowed to display it in English or in any other language, and it has source code, and we will see that. So I'm a Mac guy and not a PC guy, so all my illustration based on a Mac. Sorry guys, I am not a PC guy. So the Intel is basically the idea what's behind those components, and we have in every aspect, we have the drive itself, the hard drive, the I/O ports, and the power supply, and the processes, and of course that we have speakers like we do here. The idea of the iPhone or any other phone is that they condense it and make it smaller so you are able to carry it. But in a big pictures, it's really hard to it's nice to see where it comes from and how it's been applied. The connection that we have with our computer is usually we have a Bluetooth, we have optional audio, we have UBS, and we have modem. All those things is something that was created back in 1990s or even beforehand. Nowadays, we connect everything wireless, and this is where the phones are such a powerful tools because of it. But basically, all those components that we can find in any computer are now available through a wireless connection. One of the things that is really important, and I really will insist that you will understand that, is the storage. How much storage do you have in your computer? And I am teaching a programming language called R, and the R is a very light in compared to example VB, which is Visual Basic, or the C++, and usually students complain, or when I teach visualization, usually students complain about storage problems. So I want you to have very clear understanding what does it entail. When we are talking about, for example, 8 bytes, or 32 bytes, or 64 bytes, we are talking about scale that allowed us to measure your file and be able to communicate that into or place it in another computer or send it via email. And this is really important because this is the essence where we're going to code. This will be one of the requirements for us to understand in order for us to produce better code. The information coding is basically, we have the idea of binary and the ability to display that in different syntax. So how to count, how to apply the 0 and 1, what does it entail? And by doing that, we have an assigned and unassigned, and that allowed us to manipulate the data and allowed us to calculate or to assign values that match to the set that we are looking for. So this is the idea of information coding with regard to numerical values. The operation on bytes is the idea of the retrieval. If we retrieve information, the Boolean will say to us that will be 2 values, 0 or 1. 0 will be false or no, and 1 will be true or yes. But we have also the ability to, when we are searching, to add more components, the and, or not. And by doing that, we are able to retrieve better, and I will talk more about that when I will talk about information retrieval. The RAM or the ROM is the ability to memory mapping. And when we are talking about mapping, most of us has music on our phone or on a computer, and videos. Those takes RAM and they take space. And by doing that, we need to calculate or to match how the hardware of our device can match it. And the larger we have, the more ability for us to save more songs, more videos, more movies into it. So I want you to remember that. I want you to understand that and how it's been calculated when we are talking about gigabyte or terabyte and so on and so on. Familiarize yourself with those terms. The hardware and the DVD is basically an ability for us to play music. If you do not have those devices anymore, for those people who remember the DVD, it is usually the idea of the head, the idea of the power of the engine, and when he tracks and had the sector with regard to how it works. So I'm not going to talk about the details inside. I just want to give you overall of what it consists of. The display is also part of even iPhone or mobile devices. And usually we are talking about, when we are talking about fonts inside a mobile device, we are talking about 2 types of visual: the bitmap and the vector. And the idea here is that those define how we see and how we apply. The vector provides us better quality than the bitmap. but it composed differently, and as a result, each company usually select the way for us to display the information, and we select it based on our understanding what it is entail. The better the ability for the pixel, screen pixel, or the dots to be extensions, not only 32 bytes but much more, the better quality you will have in your display, and this is something that is universal with that regard. The mouse on the keyboards are the input, and nowadays in the iPhone or any other mobile device, we have this ability, and they give us on the screen or give us to purchase a keyboard or a mouse in order for us to make it work better and works faster. Okay. We talked about the physical components of the computer. We need to also talk about the programming of the language that the computer works on. And when we are usually talking about ASCII under the Windows environment and uncoded under other application. And so the idea here is that how do we see it? What does it entail? How many bytes of information it allowed us to apply and store? And by doing that, the more we're able to use the uncoded division, we are able to store more information and more data out of it. With regard to the software layers that is found in also both platform, the hardware, the laptop or your computer and your phone, is that we have the hardware, we have the ROM, we have the operating system, the Mac, the Linux, or the Windows, and the user interface, which means what interface are we looking at? Nowadays we have Google interface too, and we have the software that runs our applications such as Microsoft Word or scripting or mail or web browser, and we have files that we keep in order for us to apply that. We have different type of file system, and what does it entail? We usually have a storage unit, we have the directories, subdirectories, and we have also the idea of what is often you found in Linux or in Mac file system is the scene that is combine everything into one single file that has more accessibility instead of subcategories. And again, back to our subject. Remember that we talked about last time about organization and classification. This is how Windows classify or organize the information compared to the Linux or the Mac, how they sort it or classify the information. So what is exactly a file, or what is a data that it consists? It is a piece of information. It is identified by the name and logical address or path, and it usually holds different type of data. Example, it can be sorted by the type of data it stores, by the size, by the type, by the creator, or the ownership, or the physical address. So the file system, again, this is the way Unix versus the Windows, or Unix and Mac versus the Windows. We have the idea of how it's sorted out, and look at how the Windows is organized. And in my perspective, Windows fell badly because I feel that in the Unix world or in the Mac world, I have more control over my data. This is something personal. This is not universal. This is my own opinion. Everyone has different opinion on this subject. I talked about files and path. This is an example. What is a path? And you can see it also in your working with your a blog. You have a path. You have where you're going to post all the assignment. This is the path to your files or your postings. And you have usually gave your posting a file name. And it has also ending with HTML or any other path. And this is really important to understand, because when we are talking about file types, we usually use execution files like that execute, that allowed us to run a program. We have data, and we have special cases that is a standard in the Unix environment. One of the things that we are often hear about the news is the encryption and comparison. Encryption is the let's start again. The compression is to reduce the size of the file. If you have a video which I cannot post anymore on Canvas because it's too big, I usually post it on YouTube that allows me a larger file. This is the idea. We are compressing the file to make it smaller. Encryption is protecting your privacy. If you have a file that you do not want your boyfriend or girlfriend or your cat or dog to see it, you have a password and username and password to protect that. The same goes with the files, and the same goes with the packing. How do we group the files, and what do we do with that? Networks. One of the things that you have the opportunity in our program, in information science, to learn is network. We have wireless network, we have wired network, we have direct network. All of those things can be sorted and understand, and there's a class for that. If you are interested in that, I highly recommend that. If you are not, it's too good to know, because you probably will need to know when you're using your phone what network are you in and what is the options you have. So when you are using wireless, usually you are using TCP/IP, and this is a domain server URL and IP is usually matched together and allowed us to do that. This is how the computer talks to each other. But without the connection, without any connection, it will not be able to make this connection. And so when we are looking at the website and we are looking for setting up, you need to know the DNS, you need to know the URL, and you need to know the IP address in order for you to do that, to have in terms of technology, we call it a handshake. One is matching to another, making a handshake in order for it to connect to do that. So I just draw something that will make more sense of it. When we are doing a client query, we have local internet connection that what expect is to the target server that goes to the DNS and the root of the DNS, and that's how it goes out and sort the information out. We also have packages, and packages is something that travels with the units, and so one computer to another, and that's what you will learn in the network class. I will not talk more about that. Just for those who are interested in that, this is a good class to do that. My area is the idea of the software, and the software is like think about that as a cooking book. So what type of cooking can we make out of it? This is something that is really all about you, how you design your software. So where does the data plays part in your software engine? What is the algorithm and the code that you use in order for you to make the software more transparent to all users? And so we have languages that allowed us to write those programs. We have low level. Usually we are talking about low level about the server side. Server side is where we keep the data, and we are not using it as frequently as a high level, which is run the processing or run the application. And so the lower level, which is called the machine code. It is the assembler. And the high level is more structured, and it consists of C or C++. And in that realm of things, we also have a high-level object-oriented language. This is where we in the school are very open, focusing on. We have a course in C++, we have a course on Java, we have a course on C, and we have a course on R. This is my obsession. This is where I can talk to you about R all day long. I will leave it out. And we also talk about virtual machines such as Java and scripting such as Perl, Python, and JavaScript. All of those things allowed us to generate data, generate visualization, and allowed us to apply that. So the compiler and allowed us to have a linker that is fast to execute. We have the interpreter, which is allowed to slow to execute but fast to debug, and we have the intermate, which is slow but sometimes it's safer to apply when we are talking about the source code and the object code. The source code consists of, when we write programming, we're talking about instructions, how to state, how to affiliate, how to operate, what to test, and what is a subroutines. And you will learn that in our classes. And we have this data structure. What is it? A variable. What is a list? What is array? What is a hash? What is a pointer? And what is an object? All of that is part of the source code that, if you are interested, and I encourage you to take class in programming. So again, I'm not going to talk about what is a variable and all of that, but I want you to give you just an overview in order for you to understand. And this is an example of a code. And again, this is in Perl. We have an open file, we have to-die file. Those are the components of the code that we affiliate in order for us to make something happen. And if you are interested to tell stories using code, come see me. I am the guy that you need to talk about that, because this is my passion. So this is something that I want you to understand and see and talk about. Next, we need to talk about information retrieval and what is I will call it IR. And so in the last 2 years, we generate more data than ever before. And so the increase on demand to better tools and better methods to access offline, online information and better facilitate to store personal, government and data are part of the discussion in the field of information retrieval. One of the problems in accessing and storing information is how to retrieve different data, different types of files, and make it more accessible and more reachable to all of us. So this course, I will not talk about this course. My mistake, it's not this course. I'm going to introduce the fundamental, but I'm not going to do that intense. I'm going to talk about overall. So this is important because this is what is the objective. So what does information retrieval stands for? Again, it stands for the information. What does information stands for? And I hope by the time now you know what is it instead. But it also stands for representation. What does representation stand for? What is retrieval stands for? And what is a system stand for? So the idea of information, yes, you already know it is about the terms data, knowledge, and wisdom. In the field of information science, it is often associated with the term document and text. But the term that is really interesting, and I think this is something that is again my passion, is the idea of representation. the action of speaking or acting on behalf of someone or of the state of being is to be representative. You read an article, you provide a summary, this is representation, your representation of the text. So the combination between the term information and the term representation is how do we retrieve a document, and how it will be presented is part of the idea of information retrieval. So the term information retrieval is the process of getting something back from somewhere. And this is important because nowadays all of us use Google. But is it better than any other system? This is the questions that many scholars try to understand and try to comprehend to better facilitate the idea what Google give us and what exists otherwise in the world. The term system is part of forming a more complex computer networks, and this is part of Google. Google is partly of a system that connects to everything. So in the digital age, we are talking about technology, a computer technology that is started the idea of the digital revolution. Part of the term came from the Wire magazine. I'm doing it upside down, and this is something that is one of the things that is really important. If you want to be part of this industry, you need to have a sense what Wire magazine produced, what it stated, in order for you to be more updated on the subject. So what type of information we are looking for when we are typing in Google in compared to what type of information we are typing when we are looking at the library catalog. So text documents is one of the things. Other things is the XML or the structural documents. Images, of course, audio, of course, video, and source code and application that will allow us to do that. All those things we are searching for on the web or on our phones or anywhere that use technology in order for us to retrieve that. One of the biggest in the class of information retrieval, you will learn about content-based search. And it is a new concept. It is based on the idea that the content of the images that you are searching for that will be matched to what you are typing. In order for you to do that, Google is working very hard on it. Microsoft is also working hard on the subject. Let's see what will happen, and I think this will be the next development with regard to searching. But before we will talk about searching in Google or in any other place, we need to talk about database. And what are the examples of database? Usually database, it's not only Excel, but it's where banks store account information, where retails store their goods, or investors, or universities scoring student grades. All of it is part of a database. So what is a database? Think of it as a collection of tables. That's model of the aspect of the world. What is a representation of the world? Let's see an example. This is an example of a table, and it consists of student ID, last name, first name, department, and his email. Again, in this database, it doesn't have that you are funny. It doesn't have the idea what attributes you always bring into the party. It doesn't show what size of ice cream you eat after a good day or bad day. No, it provides only basic information that allowed us to develop or to understand or sort out information. Example grade, example course ID, example student ID. All of that help us to look at the overall effect. So database query, when we are searching at a database, what class is John enrolled in? What is the highest grade in the class of library science? Who is in the history department? Those type of questions are often allowed us to do in query in a database. Database is not Google, it is a closed-minded set of data. So in this case, what are we retrieving? We are in database, we are retrieving structural data, clear segment based on the code, the data that available in the table. In IR, it's mostly unstructured. It is free text with some metadata, and I will talk about metadata as we go along. So it is formal versus informal. The result we get is always in database, is always exact. It is always correct. In IR or in Google, sometimes it's irrelevant, sometimes it's not. And this is a big issue that Google is trying to fix or trying to do that. The interaction with the system is usually one-shot query. And in the IR or in Google, it's multiple queries that you are asking to do in order for you to apply that. So the four components of information environment is the user, the process, the system, and the collection. So we are talking about the idea, what does it entail? And how does it all apply? When we are talking about library catalog search, we are talking about what is the collection, data collection. In the case of Google, we are talking about all the people that post the queries, the website, and so on. So it's a little bit more open, and that's why it's so hard to have an accurate result out of Google compared to when you do a search in a table. So we are talking about, when we do that, we are talking about indexing, and we are talking about collection, and so on. And I tried to make it as simple as I could about the source of the search, the query of the search, and how to apply that. And so what is the biggest problem of IR? Finding documents relevant to the information needed from a large document set. And this is the problem that we are often entail. What do we do? And this is still a problem for Google, and I'm sure that they are still working for that. One of the results of that was metadata. And metadata is the idea that we take description that will allow us to give more description to the document that you post on your website, and that describe what does it entail, such as who is the creator, what year was it created, what city, what date, and so on. So all of that is part of our documentation, and this is part of what is it entail when we are talking about metadata. There's a great video on metadata. I hope that you will be able to see it and watch it, and to understand the importance of metadata with regard to the social media and the web. So the metadata consists of more structural theory. I'll just give you a background. More information about information retrieval will be presented in the class, but it has descriptive data, we have structural data, and administration data. All of that provides the user, when it search on Google, allowed them to have more information. Even when you use Microsoft Office, they nowadays allowed you to add metadata into the file in order for it to be kept and be accessed by search engine. So we have a standard, what is it in example, and how is it entail. I talked about several examples. I talked about double core and TEI and EAD, and what does it entail. those are the things that you're going to learn in information retrieval. This is the tools, and with regard to resource description framework was developed by the web for the web, and it allowed to have more resources. So it's basically a framework and how to access and provide more information and how it embedded into the HTML code. I'm not concerned if you're not familiar with that and it's not your area. That's fine. I want you to have a background so you will have better understanding what does it entail. Concerns about metadata, it's usually not enough. We need to know more. And one of the things that we see lately is that a lot of companies trying to match up the metadata into multimedia. It's not a very smooth operation because text, we can take the text and create the metadata in multimedia or in video. When we picture ourselves, or it usually does not tell us who is in the pictures, what is it in tag, and more description. It lacks off, so it is probably one of the biggest problem that nowadays companies using social media to capture that data, make it more approachable. So again, two approaches to multimedia and images, description and content base. Let's see what will happen as we develop more tools, but this is something that is ongoing, that is still processing. We do not know who is going to win in this war, but it is developing stage. So I talked about a lot today, and I feel that this is a long description. You will have the PowerPoint presentation, so you'll be able to go it by yourself. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you learned something about that, and I will see you next time. Have fun.